My name is Bill King, for those of you who don't know me, and I have to say that I am quite honored to take the position that our patron saint, George Lusty, would ordinarily have had. However, in at least two respects, I deserve the honor. First of all, George's birthday and mine were about a week apart, although he was fond of reminding me that I was older. The other is that my physique closely resembles George's before he went off on his long northern trips. We have three very interesting speakers tonight. The first is Blair Doyle. I hope that you all took Alex's advice and printed off the program, because I have to say that reading Blair's bio makes me dizzy. To sum it up, he is a general all-round man about water, but I think tonight he's probably going to be wearing his first responder hat, because his talk is entitled Wilderness 9/11, Reality Check or Relief. Blair.
Testing, testing, testing. Not too loud? Very good. Kind of ironic, eh? Calling 911 in the woods. In fact, if a wilderness first aider or a paddler calls for help in the wilderness, does anybody hear? Classic line. What you're looking at there is just some of the few hats, I guess, that I wear. And you guys, I guess you could read some of the bio stuff, so I won't bore you with that. This is your evening, not mine. And so I'm going to walk you through a little bit of a story. I'm from Nova Scotia, and we do in my busy life, I take a week every April. I dedicate that, and we go through the middle of the province. And so the little yellow dots there is the start and the end of the one we did in 2 years ago now. It's about, we try to get 5 to 6 days in, and generally we're in the middle of nowhere, if we can at all help it. And so the trip starts out as all trips do. We load up, we pack, we plan, and we get down to the put in, and we put in. Sounds familiar to probably everybody here. And it always starts out nice and flat and calm and beautiful. And we have a few characters, of course, that like to play in the water and get right in the water. Actually, the guy in the water is primarily a whitewater kayaker, actually, and that plays a role in what you're about to see happens. And as always, you run into some obstacles. Not hard to manage, though. We'll do a little limbo under the bridge. And we always, as always with all trips, we have our portages. We have to go around a fish ladder, this one here. And we always find a nice camp spot. This is, I think, night 2 is what it is. So we're well in now, in the middle of it all. And a few more obstacles on the next day. Welcome to our woods. And there's always evidence of others that have been down the river before us. But that's those other people. That doesn't happen to us, right? That happens to other people, so. And of course, then you run into some real water, some real moving water, some fun water, I guess, which our whitewater guys were really stoked and excited about. And that's one of them down there scouting it out, seeing what the lines are, see what he can run. And get another perspective, I guess, seeing what they're dealing with. So we decide we're going to take our gear out of our boat, and we're going to go around and drop our gear below the portage and just run with the empty boats, of course. Now, unfortunately for this journey here, we ended up with a fifth wheel. We didn't have a full tandem of 6. We ended up with 5. So I ended up taking my kayak, and these guys were running in the canoe, of course. And so they decided to run it, and that is a 2-week-old Novacraft Moisey. And of course, it's always somebody else's fault. And fortunately, you have me in the kayak, and I guess unfortunately for them, I've also got a GoPro phone, so I'm filming everything. Get some good shots. But our ouchie occurs in the middle yellow dot. Anyone had that happen to them in here? So we're pretty much about 50K in. We're best guess, we have a whole labyrinth of logging roads down our way, so it's about a 20-kilometer hike to get anywhere. So now what? Now what? Yeah. Duct tape? Yeah. Do we have enough duct tape? That was definitely a lot of questions asked. So who are you going to call? So across Canada, what you're looking at there is some who you're going to call folks. Some of you might recognize some of the symbols. The RCMP should be familiar to some of you. I guess in Ontario, it's primarily the OPP. As your provincial police force, you get the DND, you get Coast Guard, you get Parks Canada. I've got our EMO for Nova Scotia, but every province has an emergency management office. And then there's Casera. Actually, they're the Volunteers of the Air. They're down there in the bottom right-hand corner. If I got a little pointer on this, I don't know if I got a... Oh, look out. So, search and rescue relief, it's a coordinated affair across the country. For those of you that aren't maybe involved or know, that's kind of why I'm here. You have provincial emergency management offices that basically are policy-setting entities. They really don't respond to a whole bunch. They would manage maybe a community issue like the fires that happened in the north, and they would manage big floods and those kinds of things, but they're not being called to a search and rescue. But they do set policy, most of them. The police authority for most of rural Canada is RCMP. For Ontario, as you're aware, is OPP, and for the Quebec, it's the Sur de Quebec, improperly called the QPP on that slide. Department of National Defense, Coast Guard, of course, Parks Canada, as noted with some of the symbols there. Provincial Air Resources, provincial natural resources provide air services, an awful lot of them around the country. That's very, very useful for searching, not just rescue. And then you get local Joe with his boat and blankets. And I would say, if you look at the Johnny on the spot that needs to occur to solve these problems, usually it's the local Joe with a boat and blankets that responds first. If you look at cases after cases after cases. It's not the people with the uniforms. On the inland waters, then just to break it down, who the police call, in Ontario is a little different. They have the OPP actually have their own search and rescue response team. But most of all of Canada is volunteer ground search and rescue, and it's completely volunteers all across pretty much North America for that matter, even down in the States. Police tracking dogs, air resources, access to any necessary resource, period. ATVs, snow machines, all kinds of things that run, I guess, run with gasolines. Fire ambulance, of course, you name it. Some of you are aware of these folks. Anyone ever have a ride with these guys? Hopefully not. If you're here to talk about it, I guess it's probably a good thing. So they're the aeronautical responders. If they respond to you as a paddler on an inland water thing, they're doing what's called a humanitarian response. That's not their primary job, is to respond to anything other than aeronautical and marine stuff. So you get the SARTECs, they're otherwise known as the paramedics of the air. And you got fixed wing Hercules. I know the fixed wing offers you what's called overhead or comfort. They can jump into the back of it though, given that it's safe to do so. So you might get somebody visit you with a parachute, which is also very helpful if you're in a bad way. And then depending on where you are in the country, I know down our way, it used to be the Sea King. I think it's the EH 107 or 101, I'm not saying it correctly, but they got the new choppers now, which we're some glad. that they do. And then they get various resources. And then last mentioned is the Casera, or what would be the Volunteers of the Air. And they're often retired pilots, retired even military folks that have their own planes, and sometimes helicopters. In BC, they have quite a helicopter resource that they respond to things. So you need to know they take 30 minutes to 2 hours to stand up, depending upon the time of day. When you go back to even the very first slide where it says Wilderness 911, most urban 911 systems, for instance, if you were to call it here right now, seek to be on your doorstep in about 9 minutes. And that can be very useful if you're having a real bad day. But if you start talking about real serious emergencies, respiratory things, cardiac things, bad bleeds, and so on, 30 minutes to 2 hours, is that going to cut it? Because it's not. These guys, when they respond, they take a little while, and then they got to fly to you too, so that's something to be aware of. Coast Guard, they look after, obviously, the water, navigatable waters. The inland waters are also looked after by the police back in the last slide, but the ocean side of it, east, west, north, is Coast Guard, and in the lakes, in and around the Great Lakes. So you got the inshore rescue boats, you got air resources, various ships, and Coast Guard Auxiliary, which is mostly fishing folks. I'm going to go through a case study here this evening with you guys, and it was mostly the Coast Guard Auxiliary that responded and do respond. They're, once again, more likely the Johnny on the spot. They're at the wharf and they're ready to go. And these are the search and rescue zones for Canada. So some of you are going, gosh, I'm up here, and they're coming from here? Because they're not. They're communicating from here, and they're dispatching resources, but the boats and planes are leaving from all over. All right, so have some comfort there. And down our way, for instance, for our area, we got Greenwood in the valley, and we've got Gander, and they look after all of this area here. And there's actually Goose Bay looks after the Labrador area. So you also need to know that it's a big coordinated affair, even internationally. We go into the U.S. zone, and they go into ours all the time. And it's all about helping you that's not having a good day. So nobody's getting to the end of this little line here and turning around because you're on the other side of it. So have some comfort there too, I guess. So good. And just for those who go into the parks a lot, Parks Canada is a territorial responsibility, and so they are talented to look after their territory is the best way to describe it. They're very resource capable given their park. Some parks, for instance, in the west, they have a lot of mountains, and so they have rope rescue options. Some parks have a lot of water, up along the Gas Bay, for instance, and so they have some water options, and the list goes on. So they're very specific to their given park. That's what they are. And they have first responders and wardens and so on that respond to those problems. So let's go back to this one. What's your plan A? What's your plan B? And I'm going to suggest, hopefully, you've got a plan C, D, E, F, and G, is what I'm going to hope. So what's your plan A? And since we got an awful large crowd here, it's hard for me just to go around and do a classroom feedback back and forth, so I'll keep this a bit rhetorical, unfortunately. That's your plan A? Yeah, it didn't work for us. Yeah, well, it didn't work entirely for us. We ended up having to get other stuff, light a few other things up. So, how are you going to call? Smartphones, superphones, they get all kinds of names now. They're not just cell phones anymore. So can you call 911 where you go? I proudly at times cannot. And I think proudly at times you can't either. But if you can call, then that is good. The Rescue Coordination Center is who also maybe you can get to talk to. Can you text? Just as a thought for those that are in the quasi zones, anyway, I've solved 2 SAR cases myself down our way. I'm search director for my team, and we responded with 30 calls a year down our way. And so we had a young fellow who put a Jeep in a brook with another young fellow, and well, actually put it on his side in the brook is what he did, because he put it off the side of a bridge. But he had one of those quasi-communication situations, and so we were able to text back and forth with him because it's a microburst And one of the things you can also do is you can actually toss your phone in the air and make sure it lands somewhere soft, or you can catch it, by the way. But if you send a text through your phone and it's a microburst and you toss it up in the air, you can also maybe get it out to the outside world. But can you get it to 911? Yeah, Ontario, I think, has the option. Nova Scotia is lighting it up, but most of them haven't got that option. It'll have to be to a third party or a friend, of course. Did you know you can go star 16 on your cell to get in touch with Coast Guard? Not everyone knows that. There's one provider that doesn't do it, but most of them do. And besides your VHF and UHF radios, for anyone that runs in along the lakes or also in any kind of coastal situation, you get through the Coast Guard. And if you can't get through the benefit of the VHF radios to the official help, maybe you can just get to somebody else on the radio. And they may not be talking English, but if you get on there and call help, 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 you'll probably get a response. The other thing, too, that's happened with these VHF radios is they've lightened up some of the requirements for training, and they're actually very, very affordable. They're down to about $100 now, and it's like a one-day course. And even if you don't got your course and you own one, no one's going to ask you for your license if you're calling for help. For people who just like to be by the book all the time. So. Satellite beacons, PLBs, EPIRBs, ELTs. Bunch of acronyms for you there. Playing my search and rescue acronym game now. So personal location beacon is what the PLB is. See if I can remember this one. Emergency positioning indication rescue beacon. There. Well, look at that. Look at that. And the ELT, emergency locator transmitter, that's the black box on airplanes. You hear so much in the news, unfortunately, when the airplane has a bad day. They're not black, by the way. They're orange and red. Yeah, so there's a whole story there. I can't remember it now. I remember reading it, but. So 1 in 10 hits of interest from these beacons that are out there result in someone, that actually needs help. The other 9 hits that they get through the rescue centers are, oopsie-daisy calls or inconvenience calls. And what's an inconvenience call? In the north on a trip, and I'm going to be late for my board meeting in New York on Tuesday. That's inconvenient. And actually, that's sadly what's happening. And so anyway, pass it on to everybody. Don't do that. It's not a good thing. Spot or inReach. Anyone recognize that? Get some pictures coming up anyway if you don't. So. And then, of course, just the traditional signaling where you're blowing a whistle and lighting a fire and creating an event. And do you carry flares? Are you a flare person? They're great for lighting fires if you're not calling for help, I'll tell you. So. But if you can get out to the outside world, and this is an real important mention, is can you answer question number 1? Anyone know what question number 1 could be? Yeah. Where are you? The most entertaining tapes and calls that I've listened to is this one. And this is just with 911, not even the rescue center, but it goes on and on and on. Yeah, I left the harbor at around 9. I went to the right. I went out. It got foggy. I passed a rock. Yeah. They're very deliberate about it, though. So what's your wilderness address? What's your wilderness address, folks? Grids. Your grids. That's your wilderness address. And so map and compass, which maybe for some was just a fun game you played in school one day, now becomes a very serious and important skill. I call it a life skill for the wilderness traveler. Right? Your ability to look at a map or even set up a GPS so that the coordinates are actually Canada, not Chile. That's the other thing that happens. And be able to read them off in an organized, succinct way. And I'll even suggest to the point where, why are you on the phone at all if you haven't got the question number 1 figured out? I suggest you're wasting precious battery power and precious time if you haven't got question number 1, because it's coming at you, I promise you. And that's an urban kind of phenomena. We have the ability with 911 just to get on the phone and just to blurt or even not say anything at all for that matter, and they can figure it out. But in the wilderness, of course, they cannot. And so you need to be able to answer that question. And all those devices, by the way, I don't know how good your eyes are, so I'll have to read it for you maybe, but all those devices run on batteries. High-tech gadgets have made hiking so much easier is the first box here. Electronic GPS, electronic GPS navigators, electric compasses, digital binoculars, electric foot warmers, cell phones, flashlights. I think it's a third of what the U.S. military carry now in theater is batteries. You wonder why they can't catch up with the guy with the robe and the slippers on. So, what else could one possibly need a hike, and that's batteries. And so I had a Canadian Ranger on one of my courses here about 10 years ago now. It's been a little while. You guys know who the Rangers are, everybody? Straw poll, yeah? Good. You guys are in Ontario. The Rangers are near and dear to your heart if you're in the north. And so Tom is with his Innu guide, I think is what he called it. Anyway, he's hunkered into a snow hole in northern Labrador in March in a whiteout. It's minus 15 with a foolish wind chill beyond that. And he's got this new satellite phone that he's been given that he's to call in and just let them know what's going on. So he can't get it to light up. It's frozen solid. And so he's got the spare battery out, same thing, and he's got it in his armpit, and he's got it in his crotch, and he's doing all kinds of things, and he's cussing and saying not so nice things, and the Innu guy gives him a little nudge, smiles at him, and he says, batteries die, white man die. Point? Rescue beacons. So anybody own one of these? Show of hands, it was a PLB maybe? Yeah, excellent, good. They're a one-way holy crap button, by the way, is what they are. All right, that's the best way to describe them. In fact, the only way that you're shutting it off is to take a hammer to it, if you've hit it accidentally. Because once they've got it, and too bad they're coming. So that's the con to that one. In the EPIRB, it's just the water-based versions of them. They go in most marine vessels, and they have automaticity. So when they hit the water, when the boat goes down, they float and they automatically go off. And of course, the ELT is that black box mentioned for the airplanes, and same deal there. They have automaticity. When the plane suddenly goes bang on the ground or loses altitude suddenly, then it also goes off. So good. So how do they work? Well, there you are on the ground, and you hit the button, and it goes up to the satellite, and the satellite sends it off to a dish, and the dish on the Earth sends it to a mission control, or what's called a rescue center. That, I think I showed you the slide there for Canada, depending on where you're at. And who do they have at their fingertips? Big resources is what they have. They'll do a little investigation to see if maybe they can, just find out this, because they have a signal code is what they have, if you're actually out or you're at home. Otherwise, within half an hour to 2 hours, you've got a Hercules aircraft exiting the tarmac or an Aurora. And then they consider the flying distance of this sucker, depending upon how far away you are and how much it has to refuel, of course, to get you, right? So, and that's great if you're in trouble, but that's a problem if you've cut your pinky and are just a little overexcited, right? Or it's gone off accidentally. Well, they put also a general marine distress call out, and you'll see in the case coming up that they did that also. And every marine vessel, if you happen to be in a marine situation, will also have to, by marine law, jockey to your location. So you've literally reconfigured, I guess, what would be the St. Lawrence Seaway, or the Gulf of St. Lawrence, or if you happen to be in the north, I guess, any vessels in the north. And that's great if you truly need help, but that's not great if it's a whoopsie-daisy. So just understand, I guess, the implications. And then you got these things here. Show of hands, who's got this stuff? Yeah, pretty popular. Oh, geez, not that many hands. I thought I'd get more than that. So the difference in these devices, well, they've got a holy crap on happy button, of course, and that's the older version of it. The new ones actually say, I think, SOS on it as opposed to 911, like that old one does. It's also got a local friend on happy button. I have mine say that I'm just going to be late. That's what I have mine say. It's a pre-written script that you type up at home is what you do, and then 10 people get a Google Maps link of where you're at if you're okay, or you have certain people just get the unhappy message is what they do, or like I use mine to say that I'm going to be late. They have purchase prices. Purchase prices actually are pretty reasonable, about $100 on the spot, and I think it's 300 on the inReach. But then the stickler is they have annual fees. The other beacons that I showed there, just it's a one-time purchase is what it is. I think they're $300 to $500 for the PLBs, or the ones you'd pack around with you, and that's it. The other ones are global. These ones are not. There's certain places in the north, there's certain places in Africa. Well, I'll be blunt. They look after people that have credit cards. All right? That's who their coverage is. We had, as an example with these devices, unfortunately, is people aren't trip planning like they used to. Years ago, people would go into the woods and they would trip plan with some depth, is what they would, because they know, well, there's bigger implications. They can't call in anybody at all, but now, of course, they can. And so we've got two guys. They're paddling around Cape Breton, as an example. They're leaving what would be the causeway in Cape Breton, if you know anything about Nova Scotia. If you don't, just go with me. And it's a if you're doing a good job of it and enjoying it, it's a good 1 month to get around. And so they're leaving the causeway, and you can see nights 1 through 9, they're hitting their little OK button, and everything seems to be going great. By the way, of the 10 people on their list that's getting the OK message, one of the people there is Mom. Night 10, nothing. Night 11, nothing. Night 12, nothing. What's Mom doing by night 13? Losing her marbles. She calls up the rescue center. I listened to the tape, actually, and she's all apologetic, knows they probably can't do anything, but she's at her wit's end. She doesn't know who to call. They can't just say to her, "They'll be fine, dear." They have to launch resources. And what happens, the SARTECs come down on the hoist just out off of Inverness, which is about a third of the way up along from Cape Breton there from the causeway. And the two guys offered the SARTECs a hot cup of tea and a hot dog. And their spot messenger that should have been affixed to their deck of their boat is still today probably still floating in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. But it clearly came loose on day 10. So the point is that you need to still trip plan. You need to tell everybody with these things, because I know a lot of people got them, that you hopefully you'll get my messages, but if you don't worry. But on night 10 or night 15 or whatever, you should get something, right? You still need to trip plan, and if you don't get something, well then please start calling out the cavalry. But we've got this constant communication, even texting as an example. We text somebody, they text you back, you text them, you text them back, and then they don't text you. And it's like, did I say something? And you start to worry. So we have this expectation of communications, and the same thing goes on with these things. So people still need to trip plan. So sat phones. So provider base, there's really two, Iridium and Globestar, that are available. The Iridiums are good. The Globestars are not as good. Hope nobody's a Globestar rep in their audience, right? So they're not like a cell phone in the aspect that there's a little more to them as far as getting them fired up, and you sometimes still have to find that special spot to get a conversation going. But once you get it, of course, you can actually have an interactive conversation, which is great. So. And you can rent them or you can buy them. They're still, in the grand scheme of phones and devices, they're still quite pricey, but they say they got the inReaches and the spots have got to the point now where there's a new one coming out. I think Parks Canada is using it, that you can text right off the satellite now. And so I'm not sure how much that'll be to start when it comes out for offering, but like all these things, they'll all come down in prices. So that's good. So what's a SAR case? Well, it's an emergency. It's actually organized. It's kind of paramilitary, although we're volunteers on the ground search end of things. We need to have a hierarchy and a structure, and it's called incident command that we work off of. It's very science-based. We work off probability theories. We work off a series of profiles. And so are you a canoeer or are you a sea kayaker? Would be an example. And then, well, where would a sea kayaker go? Where would a canoeer go? And then actually we start drilling even more into in the investigative side of things. And who exactly are you? One of the things you also need to know is that as time goes on, the police will also be, well, with permission, of course, but barreling into all of your electronic everythings. So that's something to be aware of. And of course, the whole interest period is to hopefully find some clues on what it is you're up to and where you are or where you're not, and so on. But that's all a part of the investigation side of it, besides the profile and the science side of it. Survivability charts, you'll read in the case coming up that, and you hear it all the time, someone's gone in the water. Those are easy survivability charts. They've got them built and available, and we've now got some land ones. We got a guy come up with a landmark book on some of this stuff, which is great, and gives us how long somebody's going to be down for, or what's the probability of survival for someone in a land situation. Very coordinated, properly a criminal investigation of interest. It's a missing persons file for the police. It's a sustained operation. It's the other thing. Once we get going on something, it's not like the police and the fire and the ambulance. They don't show up and just be gone and over sometimes in a half hour or an hour. So it takes a lot of human energy to run one of these things. This is also an important message, is half of our calls are successful, but not. We find them, but it's a recovery. And sometimes it turns into an evidence-based ordeal. And 90% of the work is search. And the romantic stuff that you watch on television is only about 10% of the time, and that's actually a true rescue. And in Canada, it's free. And I guess we could begin to debate that, and I'm not. This is another Coast cartoon. Coast, I know you guys pay much attention to Coast, but I like them. Lost, and it's getting dark. We're in trouble. I'll call search and rescue. We can send out a search party, but we'd appreciate a minimal donation to help us defray the cost. And he goes back to his pal and says, what'd they say? We're going to die out here. I'm not a supporter of the billing for it. Some jurisdictions I know you hear down in the States that have gone and done this. Grand Canyon is another good example. I guess if you're going to go into the Grand Canyon without a guide, you have to be able to swipe $5,000 on your credit card. And then if it costs more than that to have to go after you, then it'll be only more than that. And the reason is, I read a good article, 5 minutes? Okay, I read a good article from a park down in the States, Denali Ranger, and he said that I will not make my park only accessible to people that have large credit card balances. Right? And I thought that was very powerful, as I mentioned. So I've been given the 5-minute ding-ding, so. Okay, so some final, hopefully, can I push it 5 more minutes? Search and rescue is not looking for you, looking for clues. We'll leave a mess. And the big message is threes, anything in threes. Think three, think contrast, and think big. How big? You're the head of a pin, by the way, is what you are when a helicopter's looking for you. And if you're in the north, that's mostly what's coming after you is a helicopter or a fixed-wing aircraft. And they're not flying slow. One mention for the boaters on this 3 front is if you lay 3 boats on the beach, you're probably not going to get a reaction to that. But if you put them in a triangle, somebody flying over that has any kind of a rescue head on their brain is going to look down and go, that's kind of different. And if they don't investigate it themselves, they'll often call it in by protocol. So, all right, some clues that are uniquely Canadian. Big contrast. Each one of those letters are the size of a snow machine. So, all right, some up-to-date trends. 65% or more these days are rescue calls, and why is because we have that connectability. Years ago, we used to have a lot of search calls, but now we got connectability because of the technology, so we're getting a lot more rescue calls. Most had some form of communication device. This is the most common error, but you just don't put it where you can actually get at it. That's a very important mention. Most did not have adequate immersion clothing if they end up in the water. And so are you preparing for the water versus the air? And I know it gets real rough, especially in the north on a warm day. Tough balance. Most had not monitored the weather. That's an interesting one. You may check the forecast, but you're not checking it again and again. And you know it changes so quickly. Most had planned just for the day. It's the most common. People have, they go for the day and they don't prepare for the could be night that they didn't expect to be out for. And most did not leave an adequate trip plan. Ever heard the line, everything you ever learned in preschool might matter today? So what did mom say to you in preschool when you left the house? And hopefully these days they're still leaving the house. Where are you going? Who are you going with? What do you got on? When are you back? And I know as adults, we tend to like, well, especially teenagers, can't wait to get away from that and get some independence. But in the search and rescue sense, we need to have somewhere to start. Okay, so we need to have some sense. It doesn't have to be big, complicated, what color your underwear is if you're going for the day. That's important if you're going on a big, long trip maybe. But we do need to know simply where you are and when you plan to be back. And on the going to be back mention, I'd never leave my official trip plan with my wife as far as my back time goes. Because, well, she rationalizes. She says, well, he's pretty smart. We'll give him another hour if I don't happen to be back, let's say, at 5 o'clock. An hour goes by. Well, he's pretty smart and he's with Dave. Let's give him another hour. And, of course, if you're counting on that, then that's a problem. I leave my trip plan with my search and rescue buddies. My search and rescue buddies, they can't wait. 5 minutes to 5, and they're texting and calling around going, oh, we're going to get Doyle on this one. It's going to be good. But what that does, though, that sets you up also for dual responsibility. If you know that the world's going to come clamoring down on you if you just kind of finish your journey and go off to the bar and don't tell anybody, which is pretty common stuff, then, well, you're going to wear that. So you want to leave your trip plan, and you're going to leave your who's going to call with somebody that can't wait to embarrass you, is the point. All right, so I guess we get time for the case?
The taxi's waiting.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Yeah, I get 10 minutes. So this right here was this event that happened out off Newfoundland. And there's two gentlemen. Sit stat, June 25th, you and a buddy of avid paddlers. The names have been deleted to protect the innocent. Plan a 2-hour paddle from your campsite at Bishi Pond to Partridge Point. You intend to stop somewhere for lunch along the way. You have a Red Sea kayak and a White Sea kayak, and you get going at about 11:30 and plan to return, of course, no more than 15:30. Winds are west, 10-15 knots. You got about a 2.5 to 3 meter swell, and visibility is good, about 10 nautical miles. Clear, air temperature's 12. You guys can read, your adults, I guess. But good. Your child adults. So what you've got here is the departure point, and you've got the destination point, and you've got the first capsize right here. And one of them wasn't as talented as the other as far as paddling goes, so he goes in the water. They managed to get him back in the water, back in his kayak, out of the water. He wasn't in for any more than, I think, about 15 more strokes, and he was over again. Got him in again. He went in third, fourth, I think it was the fifth time, and the fifth time, they were just, well, with the temperature of the water, they had some protection on. They had a shorty wetsuit and just a paddling jacket is all they had for thermal protection. And the wind, of course, starts to blow while all that's going on. And what ended up happening is they end up getting blown way out over to here. Yeah. So this is the actual transcript right from the rescue center. I've got two good friends that are with us on the volunteer team, and they work up at the rescue center, and so we get a lot of these cases come through the door as a reality check. So and it's a little bit of SAR speak going on up here, but the 26th at 7:01 local time, Spot International Rescue Response Coordination Center contacts the rescue center in Halifax, and they have a spot activation at 6:40 local time in Canada, and the position is that island that I just showed you, actually, back on this one here. That's the location. It's on the eastern island of the Horse Islands, Newfoundland. In the case, the spot, apparently what it was is they had the spot on them, and this is a big message for everyone that owns these things. They got it out as they were drifting away, and he was hanging on to his buddy who was still in the water, and his boat was, of course, capsizing, hanging on to his buddy and his boat at the same time as the wind blew them to the island. And he said, hey, I got a spot, but it's in his hatch. So they had to get it out of the hatch, and then when they lit it up, well, the thing was red. Now, every other time he's lit it up to say, okay, it went green, if you know this thing. And this time it's red, but he figures, okay, well, it's an emergency, I guess. It's going to go red this time because it's an emergency. It's not just an okay button that I'm pressing today. That wasn't the case. What the red meant was the thing didn't have enough power to do its business. And so 18 hours and 10 minutes later, after he originally he tried to hit it at 12:30 the day before. Of course, he got to the island. He'd let his buddy go. He couldn't hang on to his buddy, and he just collapsed on the beach. The classic Gilligan's Island, lands on the beach. And then he woke up a couple hours later when the sun hit him, and he went over and he exchanged the batteries out of his GPS into his spot messenger. And when he hit the button, he had a cormorant overhead in no time. So just to go through the timestamp quickly, 20 minutes. Within 20 minutes, they did a quick call to the next of kin, and the cormorant helicopter was in the air from 103 Squadron Gander. 32 minutes into the case. 7:33, St. Anthony Coast Guard radio puts a broadcast Mayday out, relay, basically a general marine distress call if anybody happens to be in the area boating wise that sees kayaks. 54 minutes, fishing vessel Atlantic Harvester, this is the Coast Guard Auxiliary, responds out to the island, to the location. 1 hour and 26 minutes into it, cormorant helicopter. They're actually airborne at this time. At the 20-minute line, they were called. Sorry. In 2 hours and 32 minutes, anyway, the spot coordinates and survivor is recovered. And so they got the survivor at 2 hours and 32 minutes. 3 hours and 31 minutes, the RCMP locate their vehicles, the abandoned van, back at the put in point. 4 hours and 20 minutes, they did a cold water immersion survival model. That's just fancy words for what's the survivability of the gentleman. He was 60 years of age, 5'9", 160 pounds wet. And then you come up with an hour and 5 minutes. 8 hours, 54 minutes, Coast Guard Sir Wilfrid Laurier, or Sir Wilfrid Grenfell is out on the water doing its thing. And then they do an updated model. I guess they got some updated from the survivor as to what the guy was wearing, that he had a wetsuit. So they updated that to 24 hours, which is great. It's better survivability. And then at 31 hours, he's located. Second kayaker deceased. So so I'm just going to skip to the fact that we did patch our boat. Is what we did. We found that putty. Get that putty at Mountain Equipment Co-op. You ever we have to put the putty on there. It molds is what it does, and then we were able to take a dry bag and we were to Vic Tech the dry bag, and then we used duct tape all to pieces. So some final mentions is leave some kind of where you are trip plan, build your judgment and skills, know where you are, and be able to say that. Have stuff. Know how to use stuff. And have important stuff in the ready place. And get out lots and have fun. I love that quote, actually. I'll leave that with you. So, all right, thank you.